Emma and Tom Talk Teaching, a podcast about all things education, presented by Emma O'Dooher and Tom Breeze. Episode 5, October Half-Term Special 2024.
Hello everyone, it's Emma and Tom here, back in your ears with a light episode, the first of this new season, and I'm feeling quite light today, Tom.
Yes.
How are you feeling?
Happy half-term, everybody, as we say this in a deserted building in August.
Yes.
We're quite happy because it's a deserted building and it's there's nobody bothering us. We're getting so much done.
No, so we've got the usual offerings for you, 3 sort of semi-light, I'm saying that on behalf of myself because we always sort of try to make this light, but sometimes it ends up not quite being as light as we originally conceived of these episodes.
No.
But yeah, we've each got 3 things. And I think, Tom, you're going to go first, aren't you?
I am going first, yes. So our usual trick is to just grab things from all sorts of random places, whether it be audio, video, text, all of that. Weirdly, mine have ended up with a bit of a theme, which I could claim was deliberate, and I would be lying. So I'm not going to do that to you.
Sometimes it happens that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm not going to do that to you, make you think I've got some sort of grand plan for these things, because I haven't. But the theme that's ended up sort of overarching my 3 is about things perhaps not being what you think they are when you first kind of encounter them. So I think that's good. I think that's a good theme to have for teachers, for learning, for universities. So it's my loose theme is things not being quite what you think they are.
Like resist the urge to be impressed that Mark Lester was talking about as well.
Exactly that, except that his is going to come out in 2 weeks' time rather than...
Shows where we are in the...
Mark Lester will tell us to resist to be impressed in precisely 2 weeks' time.
Sorry, everybody. We are. I'm showing my hand now. We've recorded a lot of episodes over the summer, haven't we?
Yes, we're very organised. We start the year with at least 5 episodes in the can, and that is because we teach a lot in September. So yes, we're very good boys and girls. And actually, this is not unconnected to my first item, which is an article from The Guardian, and it says, "Are you a precrastinator?" Have you come across this?
Is it precrastinator?
Yes, I said precrastinator. My elocution was accurate. Are you a precrastinator? The opposite of procrastinating has its downsides. So I don't know whether are you a procrastinator?
Oh, absolutely. Right. I have no shame in telling you that.
Well, actually, I am probably, as we're about to find, a precrastinator, and we're about to find out that that's not such a good thing. So it might be that you beat yourself up for procrastinating. I don't know. Some people do. Some people feel it's a bad personality.
I think I'm becoming, as the older I get, the more comfortable I'm becoming with my procrastination habits, more aware I am of myself.
more comfortable in your skin,
yes.
Procrastination-wise. Okay, well, anyway, this might make you feel better then. Okay. And it's definitely a warning to me. And it also, I would say, links to... Do you remember when we used to do the Wellbeing Slot and we talked about survival cuppers way back in season 1? Mm-hmm. And it's almost entered our language because it is a really important thing, that idea that you just stop and you sit and have a cup of tea before you do something silly, before you do that email that's going to get you sacked or, get angry with somebody. So here we go. Are you a precrastinator? The opposite of procrastinating has its downsides. You are probably familiar, says the article, with the perils of procrastination, putting things off until the last minute, until there's a mountain of emails, chores or homework to get through. Advice on productivity and time management often covers procrastination, understanding why you waited so long to do something and how to start on a project sooner. Yet, there's another way we manage our tasks that can get overlooked. Precrastination, considered by some psychologists to be the opposite of procrastination. Precrastination is when a person does a task as soon as they can, so they don't have to think about it anymore. Does this sound like me? Often before it needs to be completed. If you're a procrastinator, this might sound like a goal to work towards, but procrastination comes with its own downsides. One can envision precrastination and procrastination as 2 extremes, said Christopher Gehrig, a psychology professor at Helmut Schmidt University in Germany. In order to check something off their to-do list, precrastinators expend extra energy on a task or rush through projects to arrive at the relief of having it be over. Here's how to know if you have procrastinating tendencies and when it can be the right time to slow down. So they give an example. You're at the airport waiting for your flight to board. Even though Group 4 isn't going to be called for 20 more minutes, you hover near the gate holding your heavy duffel and suitcase. This is a classic case of procrastination, wanting to get something over with, getting on the plane, so that you don't have to anticipate doing it any longer. This comes at a cost, carrying all your stuff rather than sitting and relaxing in a chair reading a book. Procrastination is when you do something early at an extra expense, wrote the psychologist Kyle Sauerberger in a 2019 paper about the phenomenon. The expense might be physical, as in the airport example, financial or mental. So then it goes on to say, why do people do it? And the concept, it says, surfaced by accident in a 2014 study led by David Rosenbaum, now a professor of psychology at the University of California, Riverside, during an experiment on walking and reaching. Right, so you've got to get your head around this now.
Oh, gosh.
In the study, people picked up a bucket full of pennies to carry and could choose between two buckets. One was close to them and one was right at the end of the alley they had to walk down with this bucket of pennies. So you've got a long, narrow alleyway. You're at one end. You've got to get to the other with a bucket of pennies. There's a bucket next to you and a bucket at the other end. Most people picked up the bucket that was closer to them, even if it meant they had to carry it a greater distance.
Why?
Seems crazy, doesn't it?
It does seem crazy.
Yeah. When Rosenbaum and his colleagues asked people why they chose the closer bucket, the participants said it was because they wanted to get the task done sooner. Their desire to lighten their mental load was so strong that they were willing to expend quite a bit of extra physical effort to do so. So it makes no sense when you think about it, but what he's saying is that people go, I got to pick up a bucket. I got to pick up a bucket and carry it. So they just pick up the one that's nearest to them, even though they've then got to carry it the entire length of the alley.
That is, I mean, I know I'm not in the situation about to do this thing, but I genuinely thought I'd pick it up at the end. Like, if you've only got to pick it up once in the task, then I'd pick it up at the end. Absolutely. Why would you carry it the whole way?
It seems crazy, doesn't it? But interestingly, it then talks about another study in 2018 where there were buckets full of balls. One was, again, close to you. One was at the other end. And the idea was you had to get both of these buckets and carry them back to your starting point.
Right.
So it's kind of like, like double the amount of stuff than in the first study. So you've got a bucket next to you, bucket at the other end. You've got to get both buckets back to the start.
Right, okay.
And it says most people picked up the first one on their way to the one at the other end and then carried both of them back rather than picking up the closer bucket when they came back. Rather than going to the end, picking up the one further away and then coming back and grabbing the other one right at the end.
Yeah, see, that's... I can see myself making a stupid, my mum says all brains no common sense, making just a completely stupid error there, going, oh gosh, I need to pick up both buckets and do as I'm told. In that situation, I might, rather than taking a pause and thinking, right, logically, how am I going to reduce the exertion of my effort? Yes,
it says people want to mentally offload the obligation of picking up the first bucket, even if it meant extra physical labour. Yeah, and this reminds me, just a total aside here, this reminds me, I grew up in a town which was on a hill, and I lived at the bottom of the hill, and all the shops were strung out up the hill. And I remember my mum, clearly all common sense and rather than brains, used to walk to the top of the hill and go to the shop at the top of the hill and then go shopping, progressively going down the hill. Yeah, so maybe I'm immune to this study. I don't know. I've never done it. But anyway, moving on. It says, doing something right away, like deep cleaning your kitchen instead of writing your essay, that's not procrastination. That's still classic procrastination. Those of us with big essays to write have the cleanest kitchens, don't we?
Oh yeah. Mine's really clean right now.
Is it? Because you're doing your doctorate.
My whole house, yeah.
Your house must be absolutely sparkling. Some people answer emails right as they come in instead of stopping to think about what they're going to say. Here's where we start getting into where you can have problems. Procrastination can push people to start a number of tasks at once and do a worse job on them, rushing to finish rather than devoting enough time to each. So it says we have, plenty of idioms that warn us against this thing. Measure twice, cut once is one.
Yeah.
Come across that one? Yeah. Look before you leap. It says being impetuous does have its cost. And then the author says, I'm not much prone to procrastination. I wouldn't say I'm much prone to procrastination either. You know me, I think you'd say not. But easy prey for procrastination, says the author.
Yeah.
I say as well, I think, in confessional mode. Lingering tasks, unread notifications, and incomplete projects stress me out, mostly because I worry they'll never get done. People may procrastinate out of the fear of not being able to finish something on time, which means that stress or burnout might accompany it in some cases. They say there's a study that links it to the personality trait of neuroticism. This is not good. Higher occurrence of negative emotions and more emotional instability. Rather than feeling intrinsically rewarded by accomplishing goals, as conscientious people are, those high in neuroticism want to get things done because it causes them anxiety to have many tasks to do. And I think we've brought Oliver Berkman to the podcast before. He has another earlier article in The Guardian, where he confesses to this and says he's sometimes more interested in the feeling of having completed something than the experience of the task itself or of doing the best that he can. He says, I sometimes worry that'll be my epitaph. He crossed a lot of items off his to-do list.
Oh, gosh.
So it says, what can I do about it? Well, there's no exact right time to do anything, no matter what it is. You could practice putting off tasks that don't need to be done right away and could use a little more breathing room, get a healthy balance between one and the other by effectively planning and prioritising tasks without feeling pressured to complete them immediately. So schedule when you're going to do things, batch up activities like emails. Now that's an interesting one, isn't it, emails? Because we know lots of colleagues who sort of say, every time an email pings in, I have to stop what I'm doing and answer the email. And then there are other people who will just shut their email off and open it up at 3 o'clock and do the 10 emails that have come in. You know, that is one that I have had to practice. And I know there are some people that can really struggle with that. And then the final thing it says, it's interesting. The special danger of procrastination is that unlike procrastination, it doesn't feel naughty. They can go unnoticed because they're proud of accomplishing a million little tasks all at once, and others may value their productivity. So it's tough, but we procrastinators need to distinguish between the feeling of alleviating anxiety and the true feeling of accomplishment. Then we can learn that some tasks are better left untouched or even procrastinated.
I think that's important. And also, I think procrastinators have got the added risk of being taken for granted. And, you know, if you wait a little bit, then maybe someone else will put the bins out. And
Ooh, it feels strangely specific.
Yeah, you touched a nerve.
There are colleagues, I'm not going to lie, there are colleagues whose emails I do not answer immediately. Or have been colleagues whose emails I don't answer immediately because I feel I will turn into their personal search engine if they think it's too easy. I'll be honest about that.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much in that. That's really interesting. No, I hadn't heard of procrastination. And that's quite illuminating.
It's about those things that feel like they're a virtue, but actually they're not.
Yeah, it's like, what are you losing? In either, I mean, that was an interesting point at the end there about you know you're guilty, you feel guilty as a procrastinator, whereas you feel virtuous potentially as a precrastinator. But you might be less aware of what the upshot of those behaviours is as a precrastinator. Yes,
I mean, I've said it many times. I got my PhD in faster than you've got your EdD in, not because mine was. I think yours is going to be better. And you're getting more out of the experience of doing it because you are prepared to take longer over it than I was. I wanted the damn thing out of the door. Yeah. And, they even had to go and check whether there was a lower word limit on PhD thesis when I handed mine in. But I think you're getting more out of yours.
Oh, I don't know. There's so much more to it, isn't it? You know, it's so dependent on context and, all the other psychological elements feeding into why you behave that, why you're putting it off as a procrastinator, why you're prioritising it as a precrastinator, and what the task is. That the article sort of covers those things. But if we take, writing an assignment or doing something that's got quite a lot of, weight resting on it, I don't know. I don't know.
It's interesting. I think it's got implications for who you get to work together. I've said many times that sometimes you're the one that stops me throwing something out of the door too fast. I think you've got to have somebody that can balance you and somebody who you're sufficiently friends with that you're not going to mind that they're sort of taking a bit more time over it. Or alternatively, I know that you've said sometimes I'm the one that just goes, right, this is done. We're doing this now. It's going to be done. So we complement each other. I'm not saying you're a massive procrastinator. I'm saying I have a vice of wanting to get stuff out the door too fast, and you balance it out, and sometimes it can work the other way as well.
Is that overthinking? Paralysis by analysis is another one that gets lobbed at people who are. I mean, and it's, I don't know, it just makes you reflect on all different aspects of your behaviours and the way you work. That David, I can't remember his surname now, the Getting Things Done guy.
Yes.
That was quite helpful because it's sort of about, clustering of tasks, prioritising them, thinking about, which one's going to take which one. What was the rule? It was like
30 seconds.
30-second rule.
Yeah. But isn't it interesting that I would reckon, and I'm only speculating here, I would reckon there's a bigger market for self-help things of that nature for people that can't get things done, and a smaller market for people who are getting things done too fast. Yes. Yeah, I would agree. Play a tiny violin for me.
It's that virtue-vice perception of those two things, isn't it?
Yeah, I think lots of people sort of beat themselves up for not doing stuff quickly enough, procrastinating, doing, being on deadline, doing things the night before. It feels like a bad thing, and it weirdly doesn't feel like a bad thing if you're pinging emails back in 45 seconds, and yet actually it's not good.
And it's whether or not, the procrastination for me, I feel like I need to justify myself here, is that because
you never have to justify yourself to me.
I've got a deadline next Thursday. It's now Friday that we're recording this. Okay, so I'm getting quite close to the wire now. It's an 8,000 word assignment. I've done about 1,000 words of it, and I've been procrastinating for weeks. But I've been procrastinating about the writing bit and I've been using other bits of the task as procrastination. But actually, if I'm kind to myself, then maybe that's not procrastination. Maybe that's me trying to get my head straight before I come to do the thing. I'm delaying the thing, getting my thoughts down concrete on paper. But I need that. Maybe procrastination, if you flip it. What's nice about that article is it's actually making procrastinators feel a little bit better about themselves. Sorry, procrastinators.
Yeah. Well,
procrastinators out there.
I know you're doing a lot of work on the reading and it will be a better thing for it, but I also know that you don't want to do the writing. So it's kind of two things at once, isn't it, with that one? You're doing the good stuff. You probably haven't really got the sparkling kitchen we were having a laugh about earlier, because you have been doing the reading, but yes, it's a very interesting one.
I also think it's got me thinking about, we've done previous episodes about sort of technology and how they use psychology to keep you interested, the red badges that pull you in, and they're often, they're catnip to procrastinators, aren't they? So if I've got my email tab open as I'm working on my doctorate and I see a little red dot on my emails, catnip.
Go and do that. Yeah, I think that's true. I think we've all got things we need to dig into and maybe make some changes to our working habits as a result. And no, neither is better than the other, I would suggest.
No, absolutely not. No, very good.
There we go. That's my first one. Enjoy that one. And see what you've got for us.
You can tell when it's good, when I lose my train of thought completely trying to mull something over. So well done. Okay. Right, I'm going to take us back into the world of... Not that you took us out of the world of education. We're always in that world, aren't we, Tom?
Oh, yes.
But I am going to... sort of précis an article. I'm going to sort of butcher an article by somebody called Gert Biester, who people might be familiar with out there. Don't worry if you're not. He is a professor of public education in the Centre for Public Education and Pedagogy, Maynooth University, Ireland.
Big cheese.
Yes, he's
Very
a big cheese. Yeah,
yes.
He is. He's also a professor of Educational Theory and Pedagogy at the Moray House School of Education and Sport, University of Edinburgh in the UK. So, he's published a lot. He's published a lot.
Yes. he has.
So you might have
Good.
seen his name come up. But what I like about this article it's actually a chapter from the Encyclopedia of Teacher Education. And I think they must have had a strict rule about word count in this publication, because it's about 2,000 words long, I'd say, this chapter. And the title is Good Teaching, Good Teacher Education, and the Education of the Teacher's Eye, which of course lured me in for many different reasons, but I think he's got some interesting things to say, and it's very recent. I think this is like 2022 that this was published. Okay, so I'm going to try and give it a bit of an overview here. So although there is a strong consensus, he says, that teachers matter, there are also a number of developments that point in the direction of a future for education where teachers are no longer really needed. There is, of course, the ongoing, but as yet not entirely fulfilled promise that at some point technology will be able to do a better job than teachers, which immediately raises the question what the job of teachers is and what it would mean to do that job better. And there are countries that have gone so far with the micromanagement of education through tough inspection regimes, narrow definitions of progress, and teaching scripts that simply tell teachers what they should do to make the education machine work.
Who could he have in mind? Or where, I should say.
And all of this is sort of moving towards this idea that teachers begin to matter less and less, he says. So looking at these developments, we might say that the real choice we're beginning to face is whether we want education in which teachers play a key role, or whether we do not really care whether education takes place with or without teachers. How's that for an intro? Okay, so he gets into it. The real question is whether we want education to be an encounter between human beings, a dialogue between the generations, a meeting place between past and future, or whether none of that matters as long as measurable outcomes are being produced. The suggestion put forward in this entry is that teachers matter, and thank goodness.
That's all right then.
And that, in order to do their work well, they need to be able to bring professional judgment to the educational situation. Okay, so he goes out to lay out the problem. He says there are two important trends that over the past decades have influenced policy, research and practice concerning teachers and their education. One trend approaches the question of teaching and teacher education formation in terms of competencies. The shift towards competencies is a shift away from a focus on knowledge, that is, from the idea that what professionals need in order to do their work is specialist knowledge. If such an approach focuses on what teachers and other professionals need to be able to know, competencies focus on the question of what teachers and others need to be able to do. Okay, so there has been a shift in some contexts towards competencies. Competencies may be a necessary condition for good teaching, but they don't make good teachers, because what good teachers need in addition is the ability to judge what a desirable way of acting is, which always brings the question of the purpose of education into consideration. That is, the question what education is actually for. So that's the first trend. The other trend, he says, is to suggest that teaching should be an evidence-based profession, where what teachers do is based upon or informed by research evidence and what works, which is mainly understood as the question of interventions. Which interventions will most likely result in effects on the side of students? Now, this really got me, because the idea of intervention, comes up in research quite a bit, doesn't it? The research that we ask our students to do, or intervening to have an impact. And he takes umbrage with this word impact. And I really like the way he explains it. So here goes. He says, one problem concerns the underlying idea that teaching is an intervention that produces some kind of impact or effect with students. This is the language of abstract forces impacting upon objects, which is precisely not the language we need in order to understand how education actually works. Teachers do not impact upon their students, which, putting it in this way, quickly turns students into objects or things, but rather, he says, they are in communication with their students. The connection between what teachers do and what happens at the side of students is, in other words, not a matter of cause and effect, but of sense-making and interpretation. And this is important because at the end of the day, we want students to gain understanding, which means that what we offer as teachers has to become part of their sense-making. That is why we communicate with our students rather than impact upon them. I thought, oh gosh, what a nice way of explaining the problems with impact and what we're really trying to, I hope, achieve as teachers. Okay, so he goes on, we're nearly there. What is problematic about the focus on competence and evidence, therefore, is that both are about the past, whereas teaching is always orientated toward the future. He says we may have information that certain things made sense in particular situations in the past, but whether that is in any way relevant for the future is an entirely open question. Teaching always happens in new situations. The teacher, so we might say, is crucially located between past and future and therefore needs to be inventive rather than repetitive. So this sort of evidence says, what works, is very much about, what worked in the past, but it's almost, if you repeat it, then you're going to get similar results. He goes on. What is missing in competence-based approaches is the question of judgment. That is, the need for teachers not just to be competent, but to be able to judge what needs to be done in the concrete situations they meet every day. What is missing in evidence is, in a sense, also judgment. That is, the ability to judge to what extent and in what way evidence, but perhaps we should use a weaker term, as experience from elsewhere, so not just evidence as in research says, but our experience in the classroom we've had previously, bears any significance for the concrete situation here and now. In addition, the danger with the whole discourse of evidence and evidence-based education is that it comes with the assumption that teaching is some kind of forceful intervention upon things rather than complex communication with other human beings. And the last bit I just want to bring to the fore, I know we've been going on a little bit, but this is important, I think, with regard to judgment. He says, in all cases, the focus of teacher education should be on engaging student teachers with a simple but fundamental question that emerges from the discussion so far, namely the question, what is to be done here and now? Or, in slightly more precise terms, what is educationally desirable in this concrete situation? The simple answer to the question, what is educationally desirable in this situation, has to be, it depends. Because in order to judge what needs to be done, we need to know what we are after. Killer part of this article. In my work, and he's referring to his own work there, Biesta's work, I have suggested that education always has an orientation towards three domains. The first is that of qualification, the presentation and acquisitions of knowledge and skills. The second is that of socialisation, the introduction of students to traditions and practices. And the third is subjectification, the work we have to do to help students to understand that they have the freedom to act, and so to help and encourage them to use their freedom in meaningful and responsible ways. One thing that makes education as a practice special is that all education worthy of the name needs to keep an orientation on these three domains of purpose and needs to find a balance between the work we do for qualification, for socialisation and for subjectification. Also, because it's easy to see that a too strong emphasis on one domain often has adverse effects on other domains. Think how education that is totally geared towards performance in the domain of qualification can really damage young people's sense of self-worth. Last bit. There is, of course, much more to say about teaching and the work of teachers, but the foregoing observations at least indicate a certain direction in trying to grasp what this work entails by highlighting that this work is not mechanical and cannot be directed from elsewhere, for example, through evidence, but is situated and contextual and, most importantly, needs to have an educational orientation. While teacher education should pay attention to what teachers should be able to do, for example, acquiring competencies and being competent, teacher education that forgets to work on the ability of teachers of teacher students to engage with the question, what is to be done, misses a crucial dimension of the work of the teacher, a dimension, moreover, where judgment is needed and teachers cannot be replaced by machine or algorithms. Boom.
Very
Yes,
nice. I have to say, I always come away from a Gert Biester piece of writing feeling very refreshed. And as you were reading that, I was trying to think, what is it? Why is it that I'm a bit of a Gert Biester fanboy? And I think the reason is that he manages to combine kind of really going all the way back to questioning the sort of real fundamentals of what you're trying to achieve in education without falling into the trap of spending all his time at 100,000 feet.
Yes.
Because there are plenty of people out there who will encourage us to really sort of go all the way back and start asking what is education for, what is teaching about, all of that kind of thing. But you can often come away from those discussions feeling, well, what does that mean for me and the inside of my classroom? And, you know, what are we kind of critiquing here? And what was so what, I guess, to put it really, really bluntly. And yet he always manages to take you to that sort of place where you always feel better for doing the thinking about it, and you're always in danger of losing sight of it when you kind of go down into the trenches and, you know, into the bubble and that kind of thing. But you don't lose sight of the realities as well, and he's sort of critiquing real things and giving you good arguments for things as well. So he's really refreshing in that respect.
I agree with you. I find his writing accessible. I find it appeals to me as a teacher and teacher educator. Yeah, and he puts it in ways that, you know, doesn't put you off because he's using, you know, terminology that's very academic. That said, he's not shying away from, like, the complexities. But just, you know, that idea of those three, you know, the orientations of qualifications, socialisation, subjectification, and how if you like, just knowing that and going, oh, if I've placed too heavy an emphasis here this time around, or, you know, what am I forgetting here? How can I recalibrate myself a bit better? It's just a useful tool when you sort of remember that, and that idea that teaching really exists in the future, and that, you know, lessons from the past will only take us so far, or what research says, or what cognitive science says, or whatever, you know. And I like any article that shines a light on how complex the job and practice of a teacher is. And anyone that says, this is my worldview spilling out now again.
Your axiology.
It is my axiology. Anyone that says that, you know, you can just, and obviously context is everything, but, you know, give them a manual and tell them to teach in a certain way, in a particular order, and it's going to create results, just completely devalues how complex what a teacher is doing live with those human beings in the classroom is. And it almost, I'm going to say it, it's almost dehumanising in a way, because if you think about it, reducing it to sort of a mechanistic act that's replicable by anybody, when you're dealing with individuals here who are whole people. I don't know.
No, I think you're right. I think the main thing I was thinking as I was reading that is that we are, as we keep saying, in the middle of a bit of a recruitment and retention crisis in the teaching profession. We are in a situation where we know that, because there are people in this place working on this stuff, we know that there are head teachers that are putting jobs out multiple times and getting 0 applicants and then giving up. And I know that there's a number of people, and I share this view, and it's kind of interesting because I haven't heard it talked about as much as you might think. I think there's a very real chance that we end up in a situation where we get a 2-tier teaching workforce, where you get qualified teachers who do the kind of thinking and the curriculum design and all of that sort of tricky, interesting stuff. And then you get deliverers. You get deliverers of that stuff. You get people who are trained in sort of basic classroom management, behaviour management kind of skills. Maybe, you know, some nice sort of pastoral stuff as well, some nice sort of relationships stuff, and that's great. And they're that sort of person that friendly face that the pupil gets. But if you're decoupling the one from the other, I think there are unknown consequences to that. And so the other thing I found refreshing about that article is that he is very critical of a cult of performance or performativity as from our point of view as performing artists. It's interesting to hear him say about the impact on people's sort of emotional well-being or their sense of themselves if so much is placed on the performance.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I worry about when you're working from a script that you're following, speaking from my own discipline now, like where is the space to come off script and for there to be that communication that he says is so important? Like you're not just impacting an object, you're planting seeds and you're trying to understand how that has landed with them through communication. And I just wonder that, and this is absolutely not a vilification of pedagogy that is quite structured and follows a little bit of a script, because I know that for some disciplines such as comprehension, teaching comprehension, it can produce really great results. But because you're dealing with humans in the moment, when something comes up and you only have the script to fall back on, not your professional knowledge, understanding, judgment, experience, all of that, then what? Then what happens in those moments?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, just to kind of flip the point of view just for a second, there is a alternative point of view that teaching is really, really hard and really tiring, and workload is stupid, and people reinvent the wheel for the sake of reinventing the wheel and burn themselves out in the process. And there is a very strong argument on the opposite side which says if you've got a thing which is going to work, stop sort of footling about and just do it. And I think the great example of that probably is when we were chatting away to Gareth Rain a little while ago. It was just over a year ago, I think now, wasn't it, that episode came out. And on the one hand, he has got some lessons where there is stuff going on that is scripted, and that like you say, there's a reason for that, and there's a particular subject domain that's being addressed there, and that is taking a lot of the mental load off teachers, and they're trying that and they're finding it's working. But the minute anybody starts thinking, oh, Gareth Rain, he's a guy that's just bringing in prepackaged stuff and all of that, you then in the same episode hear him talking about, what he discovered about the kids' ability to catch a ball when they came back off COVID. And now all of a sudden he's right, we're getting this equipment in, we're putting this on the timetable. It's like the complete opposite of that mindset. So that's why you need to be reading your sort of Biesta type stuff, because it is asking you those sorts of big questions which will allow you, I think, to navigate your way to an answer which balances those two extremes and does the right thing by your pupils. Yes,
I agree. But I think in all cases that notion of judgment is important. The Gareth Rain example was important there because he's read a thing, he understands his kids and his context, and he makes a judgment call, taking all of those things into account. So
and articulated it very well to us.
Yeah,
didn't he,
yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say I totally agree with what you just said there, Tom. There are, why would we not teach practices that are tried and tested and work, but temper that idea with judgment? Because I do think you sell someone short if you say, if you do this exactly as I did it. And we see it time and time again, don't we? In our own practice, I've made this mistake myself, that that person doing it has got to find their way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's that stuff in the Warwick Mansell website, isn't there, about that academy chain that are using scripted stuff for form time, for example. And again, we don't know why. We don't know why it is, but everybody's sort of reacted against it and gone, that looks absolutely horrendous. And I would probably agree, because my form time didn't involve any scripts at all. In fact, it pretty much involved not doing any of the stuff I was told to do, because I had a judgment about what I felt the kids needed in that time. But yeah, it's very, very important, I think, isn't it, to ask those questions, because I think there is a creeping danger as the profession gets smaller. It gets harder to hang on to people. People get more burnt out. There's more problems coming in. I mean, again, going back to Gareth's episode, he was telling us, I can't remember if it was in the episode or certainly when we were on tour with his school, the complex problems that the kids are bringing in with them now into school. And so these questions some would probably characterise them as quite indulgent, wouldn't they? Some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't got time to be, winding all the way back to the boathouse and working out what my philosophy is for teaching. But I would say that's a dangerous, but dare I say, even a slightly procrastinating view of the problem. Like, I just need to teach some lessons.
So there we are. I mean, so much to pull out of that. We could
Yeah.
do a whole episode
We
on this, but I recommend reading more of Gert Biester's work
Yeah.
if you found it interesting.
Do you think he'd
I
come
just
on?
read. Oh my God. I don't know.
He does a lot of conferences. I've seen his name on a lot of conferences. I think he was at one I was at and I didn't get to his thing, but I think I was in a thing that was on at the same time as him.
Gosh.
He was in a couple of rooms down. I was watching another presentation and I was the only audience member because I think the other room, they were pretty much hanging off the light fittings to get in there because Gert Biester was speaking.
Edgy celeb.
Yeah, he clearly does it as well in sort of, presentational form as he does in writing. So yeah, go out and look for Gert Biester. Maybe we'll see if we can get him on as well.
Great.
Okay, moving on to my second one. You'll be pleased to hear it's an animal-based story.
Oh, wow.
I know you
Okay.
like an animal.
Yeah.
Any kind, as long as it's not dangerous. This actually has made the mainstream news in the last couple of weeks. So you might be aware of this story. Listeners might have been aware of this story. By the time this episode comes out, it might have sort of disappeared into the background a little bit. So I'm going to bring it back.
Okay.
This again is about things not being what they seem. And this is related to the fact that we are, as a teaching profession, trying to be more in the sort of world of research. We, as teacher educators, are trying to be researchers far more than teacher educators tended to be in the past. There are pitfalls with that, and I think this is going to be one of them. So here we go. How easy is it to fudge your scientific rank? Meet Larry, the world's most cited cat. This is a story from Science, but it also appeared in all the newspapers, and it originated from the blog of the person concerned.
Is
But
science as big as nature?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That. It's their website. So, Larry Richardson appeared to be an early career mathematician with potential. According to Google Scholar, he'd authored a dozen papers on topics ranging from complex algebras to the structure of mathematical objects, racking up more than 130 citations in 4 years. It would all be rather remarkable if the studies weren't complete gibberish and Larry wasn't a cat. I'm going to take the picture. There's the picture from there. You can have a picture of Larry the cat. There you go.
Larry
That
the
is the
cat.
world's most highly cited
Oh, he's
cat.
very beautiful.
Very
cat.
nice, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So here we go. It was an exercise in absurdity, says Rhys Richardson, a graduate student in meta-science and computational biology at Northwestern University. Earlier this month, he and fellow research misconduct sleuth Nick Wise at the University of Cambridge cooked up Larry's profile and engineered the feline's scientific ascent. Their goal, to make him the world's most highly cited cat by mimicking a tactic apparently employed by a citation-boosting service advertised on Facebook. Naughty. In just 2 short weeks, the duo accomplished its mission. The stunt will hopefully draw awareness to the growing issue of the manipulation of research metrics, says Peter Langer, a higher education consultant and emeritus professor of political science at Duke University. I think most faculty members at the institutions I know are not even aware of such citation mills. As a general rule, the more a scientific paper is cited by other studies, the more important it and its authors are in a field. Inflating a researcher's citation count gives them a tremendous advantage in hiring and tenure decisions. Important, says Jennifer Byrne, a cancer researcher at the University of Sydney. It also drives the business model of shady organisations that promise to boost your citations in exchange for cash. If you can just buy citations, Byrne says, you're buying influence. Enter Larry the cat. His tale began a few weeks ago when Wise saw a Facebook ad offering citation boosting. It wasn't the first promo he and Richardson had seen for such services. The going rate appears to be about $10 per citation. But this one linked to screenshots of Google Scholar profiles of real scientists. This means that the duo could see just what citations were driving up the numbers. The citations, it turned out, often belonged to papers full of nonsense text, supposedly authored by long-dead mathematicians such as Pythagoras. So in other words, they were fake papers. They were just gibberish text full of citations and with a fake author name. They'd been uploaded as PDFs to the academic social platform ResearchGate. and then subsequently deleted, obscuring their nature. Wise and Richardson had to dig into Google's cache to read the documents. Wow, this procedure is incredibly easy, Richardson recalls. All you have to do is put some fake papers on ResearchGate. Now, ResearchGate, I don't know if I've got an account on it or you have. There are a couple of these. So, you can do what you like with that thing. It's so easy. Wise noted at the time that a quickly written script to pump out plausible-sounding papers could make anyone highly cited, even a cat. I don't know if he was being serious, Richardson says, but I certainly took it as a challenge, and he knew just the cat to beat. FDC Willard. So just a little side issue here. There was a theoretical physicist called Jack Hetherington who in 1975 wrote a paper and then having written the whole paper realised that he had said we all the way through, as you often do. You talk about we as the authors, but then he realised he was the only author on the paper, so it didn't make sense. So in order to not have to go through and change all those we's to I's, he added his cat as an author. It's a bit of a joke. So as of this year, Felis domesticus Chester Willard, FDC Willard, has 107 citations. So this was the cat to beat, you see.
See, I love that bit of the story. That's great. Okay.
Yes, to break that record, Richardson turned to his grandmother's cat, Larry, who you now have a photo of. Yeah. In about an hour, he created 12 fake papers authored by Larry and 12 others that cited each of Larry's works. So 12 papers, gibberish, Larry's name on them, 12 other papers with fake names, and each of them has all 12 of those other papers on it as a citation in the bibliography or the reference list, for a total citation count of 144. Richardson uploaded the manuscripts to a ResearchGate profile he created for the feline. Then he and Wise waited for Google Scholar to automatically scrape the fake data. On the 17th of July, Larry's papers and 132 citations appeared on the site. Google Scholar failed to catch one spurious study. And thus Larry became the world's most highly cited cat. I asked Larry what his reaction was over the phone, Richardson told Science. I can only assume he was too stunned to speak. Although Larry's profile might seem obviously fake, finding manipulated ones usually isn't easy, says Talal Rawan, a computer scientist at New York University, Abu Dhabi. Earlier this year, he and Yasir Zaki, a computer scientist at the same institution, and their colleagues scanned more than 1 million Google Scholar profiles to look for anomalous citation counts. They found at least 114 people with highly irregular citation patterns, according to a paper posted in February. The vast majority had at least some of their dubious citations from ResearchGate. So then there's a nice boilerplate quote from ResearchGate about how much they appreciate science reporting this particular situation to us, and they were using this report to review and adapt our processes as required. Google Scholar removed Larry's citations about a week after they appeared, so he's lost his unofficial title. However, his profile still exists, and the dubious citations in the profiles that were in the advertisement remain, so they haven't fixed the problem. Google Scholar did not respond to requests for comment. Many researchers would like to see less emphasis on metrics that have what Langer puts as the undue glow of quantification. As long as the benefits of manipulating these systems outweigh the risks and costs, Wise says people are going to continue to try to hack them. How can you create a metric that can't be gamed? I'm sure the answer is you can't.
See? And once again, we're proven right. As soon as you put a number on something, that's the thing that everybody chases, isn't it?
It is. And I think there's an interesting one here, because what we have with teacher education in universities is a whole bunch of academics who previously have not been in this world. And this world is a bit of a Wild West, quite clearly. Yeah. There's clearly a lot of stuff going on. Dr. Louise Allen Walker has been in and told us stuff about this kind of thing, hasn't she? The retraction crisis. I came in a while back and told you that interesting story about the dodgy studies with the quant data that was messed with. It was Christmas last year. Yeah. There's a lot of this stuff going on. And I mean, the real punchline actually, weirdly, was in the first bit of the article, wasn't it? Which is that people's careers are being made. Bought. On this stuff. Yes. Yeah. I mean, we're in a funny sort of world here in teacher education because we come in with qualified teacher status. Yes. It's actually, we often end up with very few applicants for our posts because you need to be reasonably academic, you need to have a bunch of qualifications, and you need qualified teacher status and loads of classroom experience. So it's a different career and it's a different world, and we're very lucky. A lot of us have hopped straight in at senior lecturer level. Some have hopped in at lecturer level. We don't have these problems of precarious contracts and trying to get what they call tenure in America. you can see what the kind of temptations would be. I mean, when we were having the UCU, our union, there was all this sort of industrial action, wasn't there, last year? There were a lot of stories, really quite shocking stories of the sort of money some of our academic colleagues in other universities, particularly the research-intensive ones, were subsisting on while they were waiting for that golden permanent contract. It's a bit of a kind of messy world, and it's perhaps one we're a little bit naive about over here.
Yeah, I think you probably... Well, I mean, I'm just going to confess now. I have a profile, not a profile. I've signed up to ResearchGate, and I get emails, and they recommend articles. But the reason why I access them was because they don't... the papers that you can access on there don't exist behind paywalls, and the ones that you can't access easily, there's like a function where you ask the author to release it to you. So I wonder, because it's got me thinking now, how do you obscure? Because I thought, this is great, they're doing a real service here. Like, people can access their work, and they're promoting other things that you might want to read, and the work of other academics, but I didn't realise that it had that sinister... So that was really helpful to learn that.
Yeah, Google Scholar, of course, scraping all this stuff automatically as well. It's these automatic things. I'm on one of them. I can't remember if it's that one or academia.edu. I get a lot of emails for Dr. Thomas Breeze in Reading University. Hello, Dr. Thomas Breeze in Reading University, who writes about bees. I get a lot of, is this your paper about bees? To which the answer is always no. But yes, I think we need to be careful as we sort of innocently bound Bambi-like into this world of academic kind of currency that we don't truly, as ex-classroom teachers, I think, understand.
Guys, corruption under every rock, isn't there? You're just
There is, and I mean, I would never excuse it, but on the other hand, when you do look at the way that a lot of these junior academics have to scrape a career early on, you can imagine it must be pretty tempting. There's also a very similar, very dodgy scene of fake conferences. I don't know if you've come across that one, but if you're looking for conferences, there are all these conferences that are just not really real.
That'll take your money and run?
They'll take your money. You can submit a paper. It can be absolute rubbish, but they'll accept it, and then you've got a conference paper. You've got another thing on your list of publications. Okay. And some of these ones, I mean, WASET is one of them, WASET. They are named and shamed as what they call a predatory conference organiser. They purport to organise, there's multiple ones going on every day in the world under these people's banner. And people have submitted all kinds of absolute nonsense to them and had it accepted for money, and then they've got it on their list, and so some people are taken in by it.
Yeah,
because you look for conferences, they're always on the search results. You got to watch out for them. But then some people do it knowingly.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you've exposed that. Things are not always as they seem.
No.
It's just icky, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, we're going to go somewhere completely different now. This is a really light one, although not to sort of devalue the content really as being sort of, frivolous. And,
I've just given you a cat picture. I can't say anything.
That was a really nice part of it. I loved that dimension. Brilliant.
Yeah, there were 3 photos somewhere. It wasn't on this article. It was on his blog of him showing the cat his phone with his citation record on it, and the cat completely ignoring it. And then said he was only prepared to take interest when rewarded for his academic work or something. There's a picture of him getting a little cat treat. So I'd encourage listeners to go and find the original blog about that, because it is really quite funny.
Oh, it's brilliant. You always find these great sort of articles that have got that sort of tongue-in-cheek. I love it. All right, so I have another podcast to recommend.
Headphones on.
Yes, true to form. This one's called Screenshot, and it is the work of presenters Ellen E. Jones and Mark Kermode. Mark Kermode has another podcast, and I can't remember what it might be called. The Take. That might be completely wrong. With Simon Mayo.
Yes, they left the BBC, didn't they? Went and made their own podcast.
They did.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of Mark Kermode. I don't always agree with his reviews.
No.
And neither does Ellen E. Jones. And that's what makes this podcast particularly interesting. So it's called Screenshot. And these presenters guide us through the expanding universe of the moving image, revealing fascinating links and hidden gems from cinema and TV to streaming and beyond. And the format is that they take a theme, or sometimes they take a person, sometimes they take a particular movie, like they've done an episode on West Side Story, or they take a theme or a convention, like Love Triangles was a really interesting episode I listened to recently. And they each go off and interview someone from, who's an expert in the field of film and television, sometimes multiple, about that theme. And through the course of that conversation, recommendations are made. So they might look at particular films that have got that convention or that theme or whatever, and then they come back together to sort of debate their differing views on that particular theme. And they've each got sort of their own particular tastes in film and television, and it just makes for a really interesting episode because you've got like a bit of their views, and then you've got some really interesting interviews. They come back together, the theme gets properly investigated, as it were, and I just find it really interesting. And recently they had an episode on Meryl Streep. And it was because she received an honorary Palme d'Or. I'm probably...
Oh, yes. At Cannes,
Yeah,
is
at
it?
Cannes Film Festival. And they discuss like why she's so remarkable, her depth, her breadth, the legacy of her career, the fact that she's not very... she's not regularly in the public eye. People don't know a lot, and it's intentional. She doesn't like people to know too much about her as a person because that creates that sort of separation from her art and her, the person and that world. Mark Kermode decides to go off and interview Kate Winslet because she's been tipped as the next Meryl Streep. I'm going to play you a really, really tiny extract of this interview because what I like about it is, with my drama head on and with my art head on, is that sometimes pupils and people find it really difficult to put their finger on why art or a particular artist is so good at what they do. And Tom and I were having a really deep discussion yesterday about, how sometimes great artists can make things look effortless or easy, but that's because there's a lot of hard work that's gone on underneath it that we don't see. And Kate Winslet, I just think, describes what an actor, what these amazing actors like Meryl Streep do that makes them so astonishing, but also makes them so frustrating because it's not always abundantly clear how they honed that particular part of their craft. So anyway, here goes. This is Mark Kermode and Kate Winslet.
The phrase that's thrown around about Meryl Streep is greatest actor of her generation or greatest screen actor of her generation, to the point that it almost became a cliche that we all knew that she was the greatest actor of her generation. I have said that I have read several articles in which you have been cited as the heir to that particular throne. As the person who is in, you can shake your head as much as you want. Here's what I want to know. Do you think it is true that she is the greatest actor of her generation? And is it possible to sum up why? Or do you think it's just a thing that people say?
Yes, I think it's true that she is the greatest actor of her generation in the same way that I would say that about Mark Rylance.
Right.
And actually mentioning Mark and Meryl in the same breath is important because you simply can't describe what they do. You can't really put your finger on it. It's like a painter or a surrealist artist. You can't really describe or define what it is that they are doing because every damn stroke is different.
Okay.
And just when you think you know all of their colours, they'll stick another one right in there, that you've just never seen before.
I'm just going to pause it there. It's literally that short. And I just thought, God, that really captures it for me, that when you find yourself in the presence of, or you're seeing the art of something that is quite astonishing, often it's because they're doing something that was unexpected, that you thought you knew what their shtick was. And then, oh my gosh, they did something that you didn't think was possible from an actor or, from a piece of artwork. And the fact that she just used the visual art form as a way into describing why that's difficult to describe was quite interesting. So anyway, thought that was quite interesting to share.
Yeah, and it's a pointer to how tricky it is then as a teacher, isn't it? Because it is kind of our job to help the pupils understand why a work of art is successful or unsuccessful, or rather why it achieves what it achieves. Because I certainly find in music, one of the things that pupils can often do is tell you how a piece of music makes you feel, but then it's kind of our job to get them to understand what the nuts and bolts are, which made that happen, so that they can try and do the same sort of thing if they want to, or their own kind of thing. So that's an interesting pointer, isn't it? It also makes me think of that whole sort of cliche about the idea that these artists that were doing sort of crazy, avant-garde, unexpected things first learnt the rules in order that they could break them.
Yes, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because, it does come back to education, that one, because could you have a really innovative, out there, trailblazing prodigy that hasn't learned the basics and suddenly starts producing something incredible in your art form, but they didn't have all of that learning knowledge. Something that rings true, actually, I think they might interview her for this podcast. I can't remember whether I think it's Kate Blanchett, who recently made a film in Australia looking at the experiences of the sort of indigenous people in Australia, and they had to find a young actor who was from that community, from that background, but they knew that they would have no acting experience. And she was amazed at how the depth of feeling, the nuance of communication, of creativity, of how they were able to absorb and get involved in and do the art form was quite astonishing. But he was like 10, 11 years old, I think. So I'm probably butchering that. I can't even tell you what that film was called.
No, I mean, another thing that came out of that for me, which wasn't the main point of what you said, but you kind of made a throwaway comment about it, was the fact that people don't know Meryl Streep as a person. And she sort of separates the art from the person. And there's this kind of weird thing, isn't there, that many people sort of feel like they're entitled to know the artist as a person, and some artists are really, really not up for that. And it made me think about a similarly talented person who we were talking about yesterday, Kate McKinnon, who was on Saturday Night Live, who, if anyone hasn't seen her, she's become quite mainstream now, I think, hasn't she? She's been in quite mainstream films, but she's a brilliant physical comic. She also does very, very good impressions. She's very funny, and she's absolutely wild when she's performing, absolutely barkingly wild, and does the most outrageous things and says the most outrageous things, often will make sure that she makes herself look, thoroughly horrible with her makeup or her prosthetics or her costume, whatever, has absolutely no preciousness about her performance. But clearly doesn't want to be known as a person. There's an interview with her out there somewhere with one of the big magazines, I think it's Vanity Fair or something, which got widely panned because the interviewer actually got nothing out of her at all. She clearly was very, very uncomfortable with being asked anything about herself, and was also kind of performing this sort of slightly zany thing for the interviewer, quite clearly, sort of putting on this front of being a bit crazy and saying some slightly odd things and all of that. But whenever they tried to actually ask her about herself, they could see that she was really uncomfortable with it and kept trying to deflect with another sort of crazy comment or another sort of odd physical thing that she did. And I really sort of empathised with that, actually.
Yes. Yeah, I get that. However, I think I fuel it a little bit sometimes in that I love hearing the people I admire talk on podcasts such as Desert Island Discs. I want to know. I think it's because I as part of my discipline, we want to understand the human situation, the human spirit, the human mind, and I want to know what brought them to where they are and why they act the way they act. So, but I can understand why they want to keep that part of their life completely separate too.
Yes, I love trying to work out what makes people tick, but that's quite hypocritical of me because I don't like people to know me. And I have a teaching persona that is very, very different from my real sort of persona, I think.
Yeah.
Or certainly certainly it's not the whole story, and I do not like people getting to know stuff about me. I'd rather just be, put my professional thing out there and leave it at that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to this worldviews thing as well, because, the second that you start, because in that, you should go and listen to that full episode, because some of the things that Kate Winslet talks about, she talks about having to go to, when she has to prepare to go to dark places as a character, and the method behind that, and you hear her version of events, and then I read about Ryan Gosling saying that he doesn't want to take on board those characters anymore because he doesn't want to have to take that home to his family or in any way. I'm not saying that Kate Winslet says she does, but she famously recently did a TV programme with her daughter, and they were both going to dark places, and maybe that's why Meryl Streep keeps it quiet as well. Maybe she, maybe she doesn't want to reveal, and maybe she already has, what's going on behind the curtain, because it might not tally with someone else's view of how you should be an actor and what that art is. Anyway, I'm waffling on now. Screenshots, a great podcast, some lovely episodes in there, 73 or so already in the can. So have a listen. Hope you enjoy.
Very good. Okay, we're on to my last one now, which again is about things not being what they seem. Mm-hmm. Nice unintentional link with your previous bit where you were talking about people making things look effortless or like they haven't done things. Although this is possibly a slightly darker example. Again, people may have been aware of this when it came out, but it was 5 years ago as we're recording this. So It may have, again, faded into the background, as may, perhaps mercifully, the subject of this anecdote, which is long. I apologise, this is long. I have tried to abridge it as much as I can. I haven't managed to abridge it by much. The anecdote is from Jeremy Vine.
Oh, okay.
The television presenter, and it is about Boris Johnson.
Oh, great. It's quite outspoken, Jeremy Vine, isn't
Jeremy Vine is quite outspoken, yes. And this was written, I believe it was put on Jeremy Vine's Facebook page. It's all over the place, so I picked it up from a website. And it was at the point that Boris Johnson was widely expected to become the Prime Minister. So 2019, he did indeed become the Prime Minister when Theresa May stepped down. It was, of course, his second attempt at becoming Prime Minister, having been knifed by Michael Gove the first time around, another favourite of yours. We were talking about political voices, do you remember?
I do.
So this is an anecdote. So Jeremy Vine at this point felt obliged to share an anecdote, which I thought was rather interesting. And again, it's long. I'm going to make it as fast as I can. With 4 minutes to go, Boris Johnson ran in. I was already concerned, maybe more concerned than Boris. It was an awards ceremony at the Hilton Park Lane. The room was packed with financial people in bow ties. It was a couple of years before Johnson became Mayor of London. At this point, he was a backbench Conservative MP and newspaper columnist. Right now, he was due to make a funny speech in 4 minutes. There I was at 9:26 p.m. sitting with a table load of London bankers trying to answer their questions. Will he arrive? Is he normally this late? Has he got lost? I answered them all as best as I could. I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't see Boris Johnson that often. You see, I'm only here to hand out the awards for, I consulted the sign at the back of the stage, for international securitisation. And Boris is making the after-dinner speech, so we've not coordinated at all. I don't know where he is. Yes, I'm a little worried too. To be perfectly frank, I had not the first idea what securitisation was either. The event was named something grand like the International Securitisation Awards 2006. I really didn't want to ask exactly what the prizes were being handed out for. Suddenly, boom, a rush of wind from an open door, a golden mop, a heave of body and dinner jacket onto the chair next to mine, and the breathless question at 9:28 p.m, Jeremy, where exactly am I? I actually had that stress feeling, a kind of sunburn creeping across my arms and back. So he was late and he had not prepared a speech and he was due on stage in 90 seconds. I said, it's the Securitisation Awards, Boris. He said, righto, and who's speaking? You are. Good God, he cried, when? I looked at my watch. Pretty much now. Eyes widened around me. I speak at quite a few dinners and always feel most comfortable if I do some research a couple of weeks before. What's the occasion? That helps. Who's attending? Then write the speech longhand in advance. It's not that I'm the school's swot. It's just that under-preparedness, that dream where you're sitting final exams in a subject that you didn't know you were supposed to revise, scares the pants off me. I noticed we now had the attention of the whole table. Boris said, OK, first up, what is securitisation? Nervous laughter. A man from one of the big Far East banks explained quietly in a mid-Atlantic purr. For now, this guy was the expert and we were listening. Boris asked for a sheet of paper. Someone produced a sheet of A4, the reverse side of our menu for the night. He laid it on his thigh below the tablecloth. Anyone got a pen? Quick! A biro slid across the table. Very quickly taking it, the future Mayor of London and Foreign Secretary began to write what looked like a plan for a speech. It was now past 9:30. One of the organisers was staring at us imploringly from the other side of the room, as if thinking, how much longer can we give him? I felt that pricking of the skin again. I could feel the stress on his behalf. This was going to be a catastrophe. He was going on stage in a minute or two with barely legible notes written on the back of a menu and no idea even of which event he was attending. An after-dinner speaker normally talks for 20 to 30 minutes. How much material did Boris have? Looking at the scrap of paper, I could make out very little of what his scrawl said. There seemed to be about 10 words. There was one at the very top that I could make out. Sheep. And then a few inches below that, another in capitals. Shark. But I could not read the rest of the scrawl. Boris harumphed and groaned as if straining at an idea. Then his arm was tugged and I heard the announcement, Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome MP and journalist Boris Johnson to the stage. Applause. I pressed my palms into my trouser legs ready for the catastrophe. And then I noticed he'd accidentally left his page of notes on the table. Could I run up with him? It would be too obvious. He was already at the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. This could be even worse than I imagined. They might have to cut out of it early and go straight to the awards. I had a 5-minute speech myself, followed by the 18 awards. The script was in my hand. I would need to be ready. Boris had the look of a man who'd been dragged out of a well by his ankles. His blonde hair seemed to spring vertically from his head as he embarked on some opening remarks where the occasional word, not always the obvious one, was shouted at double volume. Welcome to the international... The catastrophe had happened. He did not know, could not remember what event he was at. This is one of the biggest fears any speaker has, forgetting where they are. Johnson then did a crazy thing. To find out where he was, he very obviously turned round and looked at the large logo projected at the back of the stage. To the International Securitisation Awards. Yes! He cried triumphantly, and to my amazement, it brought the house down. There was a huge cheer. Everyone realised this was not going to be a normal speech. The chaos had descended on us. We were in it and we were going to enjoy it. Sheep, he began. He started a story about his uncle's farm and how outrageous it was they couldn't bury animals that had just died, as they used to do back in the 60s, 70s and 80s. No, he said, EU regulations meant an abattoir had to be involved. One died today. A sheep. And my uncle had to ring a fellow at an abattoir 50 miles away. His name was Mick. No, it was Jim. No, sorry, Margaret. That was it, Margaret. People were now not just roaring with laughter, but listening. He continued, which is why my political hero is the mayor from Jaws. Laughter. Yes, because he kept the beaches open. More guffawing around me. He spoke as if every sentence had only just occurred to him, and each new thought came as a surprise. Yes, he repudiated, he forswore and abrogated all these silly regulations on health and safety and declared that people should swim. More uproar. Now I accept, he went on in an uncertain tone, that as a result some small children were eaten by a shark, but how much more pleasure did the majority get from those beaches as a result of the boldness of the mayor in Jaws? Brilliant. The whole room is hooting and cheering. It no longer matters that Boris has no script, no plan, no idea of what event he is attending, and that he seems to be taking the whole thing off the top of his head. I realise I am in the presence of genius. He then goes on to explain another story that Boris Johnson mangles and destroys. Later, he says, I sent Boris a postcard. Boris, brilliant, inspired, funniest speech I've ever seen, in the presence of the master. He responded a week later in the scrawl I remembered from the back of the menu. Jeremy, you were incredible. I thought about that night for a long time. During the Blair years, we got used to a way of presenting information that was so mechanically smooth, so professional, that in the end, we stopped believing any of it. This mastery of the message eventually backfired completely and came to be known as spin. Was Boris, with his total lack of varnish, part of the new wave? 18 months later, after the marvellous securitisation night, I arrived at an award ceremony for a totally different industry. Cannot recall whether it was concrete or chiropractors, but once again, I'd dutifully done my research and brought my script. However, the organisers had asked for only 5 minutes of opening remarks. Is anyone else speaking? I asked. Boris Johnson, the organiser said. Do you know where he is? And here we were again. He was due to speak at 9:30. He arrived 7 or 8 minutes before the actual moment. "Jeremy," he said, "what is this?" I told him. Others at the table helped. Did they have a pen, paper? Both were produced. A better ballpoint this time, and the back of the menu again. I watched, fascinated, as Boris pulled the paper across his thigh and wrote a few words. Yes, sheep was definitely one, in a barely legible scrawl. Then he was on. "It's wonderful and a privilege to be here at, oh goodness." Laughter. He turns, reads as if off the screen. Shocked expression, as if that has honestly never happened before. My God, I'm so sorry. How embarrassing to forget which awards I'm at. Louder laughter, the hair everywhere, into the tirade about the uncle who is not allowed to dispose of a dead sheep on his farm and had to call the man at the abattoir. I can't remember his name. Mick. No. Jim. No. Hang on. It was Margaret. Then to the mayor from Jaws who kept the beaches open. A moment's pause. I do accept that some small children were eaten by a shark as a result. The hair really is all over the place now, as if rising to meet the level of the audience's appreciation. On we go to the George Brown story. That's the story he messed up that I didn't read. And the next anecdote and the next. And I realised when I saw these two Boris speeches, it made me pose the fundamental question, the one that concerns you most when you listen to a politician. Is this guy for real? And so it was all an act, the same jokes, the same anecdotes, the same pretending to not have a speech.
Oh, it's his shtick.
It is. And talking of podcasts, there was a very good one on BBC Sounds about the life of Boris Johnson, which actually was very interesting because he is a complex and really quite sad figure in many ways, quite a tragic sort of figure. He's obviously somebody who's had quite a very complicated life, and that's not in any way to excuse. I mean, he came to grief quite spectacularly sometime after that article came out. But people who appear to be effortless, people who appear not to have prepared, people who appear to be doing everything by sheer force of talent, watch out for them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a different sort of deceit, isn't it?
Yes, we talk about the deceit of having done lots of prep and then trying to make things look easy, which is sounds like what Jeremy Vine tends to do.
Yes.
Boris Johnson, slightly different, possibly a slightly darker kind of deceit.
Yeah. Making the audience feel like they're getting that, off the cuff.
That every man
It's
sort of
the
thing.
same sort of deceit that you feel, completely different, when you realise that those conventions in pantomime where they try to make it look like a one-off when you were there, and then you go and see it again and you realise that it's not a one-off. They actually try and manufacture an authentic moment in the audience. It's like, what? No, I thought that was just for me. When actually, no, you were playing me the whole time.
It's part of the art, isn't it? It's part of the art of being the kind of performer or the after-dinner speaker. But of course, the thing about Boris Johnson, a bit like Donald Trump, and of course the two have been compared, by Trump himself, actually. He referred to Boris Johnson as Britain's Trump at one point, is that they are simultaneously pushing the idea that they're sort of one of the people and all that kind of thing, and it's all very authentic, and actually it's completely part of the act.
Exactly, it's part of the act, and it reveals the lack of care for the people you've got in front of you. And I know I'm probably being a bit heavy-handed there, but if you think about those two philosophies, Vine, I need to find out a little bit about and I need to tailor my speech accordingly, and I need to know where I just think it's cheap.
It's very telling that one of the many things that was said about Boris Johnson after his eventual downfall, because let's not forget he was, all his ministers resigned. He had to stop being PM. Then he left the Commons before they could punish him for sort of one of his many misdemeanours. One of the phrases that was often deployed about him was that the people that know him best liked him or trusted him least. And it's funny, isn't it? He really got in because the leadership procedures of the Tory party involves putting the last two out to the people who, of course, don't, or the members, the party members, who, of course, don't know him. And he was one of those people where they said, the people that are closest to him trust him the least.
Well, and he is a showman. I'll never. Everybody who witnessed it will remember him on that zip wire. You remember towards the run up to the Olympics, and he just. But what looked like, oh my God, what a buffoon. That was all probably part of the act as well. He's probably more in control of that buffoonery than...
I once read a scurrilous rumour that he actually ensured that they slackened the zip line so that would happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's true, but somebody has said it is true.
Yeah, I don't know. I find it deceptive and cheap.
I think thinking about our last two items, there is a difference between the sort of keeping yourself back and letting the professional thing speak for itself, and that which is sort of deceiving people about being a certain type of person and getting close, the feeling that you're their friend or something like that.
Yeah.
Or that you care about them when actually you don't.
No. Yes. Oh.
There we go. Apologies. I couldn't get that any shorter.
No, I think it was great. And hopefully the listeners will too. I thought it was a good story.
The original anecdote is longer and very interesting.
Okay. Right. Well, we'll end on a bit of fun, shall we? Although I say fun, this might not be everybody's idea of fun. If you listen to what I think will have been the
2 episodes
ago, where I talked about how I'd arrived at my epistemology, ontology and axiology, those stances. I mentioned in the short slots in the last episode, if you managed to stick with it in the previous episode, that something you might want to try is to find out by using a very fun quiz online. If you just type in, how do I figure out my epistemology? There are quizzes that you can find online that will help you to figure these things out. Now, obviously proceed with caution, but I thought I'd try one out on you, Tom.
Excellent. Well, since yet again we've been here so long that our studio animation is frozen, it's probably a good thing that I've put the quiz up on the big screen. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see me doing this quiz. So have I got to answer these 7 questions?
You have. Okay, so this one, finish the sentence. The scientific method is... A, the only proven way to discover truths. B, flawed but an effective process to answer many questions. C, an invented method of inquiry designed to increase the perception of certainty and truth in a scientist's mind.
Okay, I could be a pain and ask how are we defining the scientific method, but rather than being that person, I'm rather going to sit on the fence and say flawed but an effective process to answer many questions.
Okay, next. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? A, no. Sound is a human construction we use to perceive our reality. If nobody was there to process and construct the sound, then it would not exist. B, very likely. There is no way to be 100% sure, but if a tree falls in a forest, it should make a sound. Or C, yes, of course. What a silly question.
I was having to think about this one when I was driving home yesterday, because you mentioned this in the previous 2 episodes ago, which, full disclosure, we recorded yesterday. And I was thinking about this. My answer to this is probably that I'm interested that there is an implication in that question, that it's the fact that nobody is there to hear it that stops it making a sound. A tree falling in the forest would compress air and cause compression waves in the air, which are then picked up by our ears and processed, and we then perceive sound. So for me, a tree falling in the forest with nobody there is still going to produce those waves, but nobody is going to be there to process them into sound. However, if the person is there, the tree is still not making a sound on that basis, because the sound is being made in the brain of the person. So the tree is not making the sound. So the tree is still doing the same thing it would normally be doing. So actually, the fact that they're talking about no one being around to hear it is almost like a little bit of a red herring. So I think the top and the bottom are both right. But I am going to lean towards the idea that sound being a human construction we use to perceive our reality, although with the caveat that the tree is still doing what the tree does.
Okay.
It was a long answer.
I mean, the question does say if a tree falls in the forest. The tree is doing what the tree does.
The tree does what it does. The tree never makes sound on the basis that sound is produced by us, wherever it is and whoever's with it.
Okay,
All
here's
right.
another one that might fall into the same sort of logic. How do we know that the sky is blue? A, observation and measurement. The sky emits a certain wavelength of light that our eye perceives as blue. B, observation and measurement. Although we cannot be 100% certain the sky is blue because our measurement systems have bias and human limitation. C, colour is socially constructed. We know the sky is blue because we were socialised to construct the world in certain ways, such as colour identification.
Do we mention colourblind people at this point?
Ah, there we are. Well,
The sky does emit a certain wavelength of light, which we have named blue. Again, it's the top one and the bottom one, isn't it? It's observation and measurement. It does emit that wavelength of light, or rather it lets more of that wavelength of light through from the sun than the longer wavelengths of light. We've described that colour as blue. It's both. So I'm happier with the top one, observation and measurement. The sky emits a certain wavelength of light that our eye perceives as blue, to be honest. I think I'm a real mixed bag in this, aren't I?
do you think our eye perceives it as blue without us knowing that it's blue? It's the perceives it as blue bit. Like, how do we go, that's blue?
I think our eye responds in a particular way to that wavelength, which our brain then processes as part of a whole load of other wavelengths. And we've been told it's blue. So, yeah, it is both of the above. I'm going to go with the top one.
Okay.
Just because I'm going to mess your results up, probably, aren't I?
Well, no. I mean, I didn't make this quiz, just FYI.
I'm a bit of a mixture, aren't I?
Yeah. But, I mean, it's that question that made me think about that whole, is it ontology? Are we semiotically constructing the world? So blue is a word. It has its semantic meaning. We are therefore codifying and defining the world that we are in through language and perception. I don't know.
I think some of those semiotic things are a bit more subtle than whether it's blue or not, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I think that's more why I went for the slightly more positivist worldview on that one. All right, hit me with number 4 then.
Is it possible to truly understand historical events? A, not 100%, although with triangulation of many forms of evidence, we can get a good idea of what happened. B, no, historical events are inherently open to different interpretations from both the first-hand participants and later people studying the events. Understanding of events is constantly in flux and therefore there can be no true or absolute understanding. Or C, through artefacts, personal accounts and carbon dating, we can recreate an accurate account of historical events.
This is an interesting one because I trained in historically informed performance of music. So we would try to use the right kinds of instruments and play them in the right kind of way and all of this. And of course, you could go really far down that and people could be saying, well, you can never do it because you're not living in the time and you're not probably got a variety of horrible diseases and, nits and stuff. And, all of that. So actually on this one, I am more inclined towards the middle one, inherently open to different interpretations. There can be no true or absolute understanding. We always got our wrists slapped if we referred to an authentic performance of a piece of music, no matter if we were even wearing the costumes and, playing copies of the instruments. So I'm going way down the other end of the scale with that one.
Sure. Okay. Question 5. What is the significance of this statement? I think, therefore I am. A, not significant. Even if you aren't thinking, you still exist in some measurable form. B, some significance, but your body is still part of the external reality. Or C, quite significant, thinking and processing are the core of existence and reality.
Ooh, we know Dr. Kev likes to talk about Cartesian dualism, doesn't he? And
yes.
Fiona Heath Diffie as well is really into quite a lot of this stuff. I've got to say, I lean a long way towards quite significant, thinking and processing are the core of existence and reality. I know that if we stopped thinking or even died, we would be a heap of meat on the floor. But I think I is the key word there. I am.
Okay.
I being the bundle of contradictions that is me.
Okay. Okay. Penultimate
Right.
question. What is the difference between knowledge and belief? A. Knowledge can be proven, but beliefs have a falsifiable problem since they can not be proved or disproved. B. Perception.
It's a short one.
I know. C. The line between the two can be delicate, but generally knowledge can be proven through experiments and beliefs have a falsifiable problem.
Gosh. Well. I mean, the knowledge one is tricky, isn't it? How can you ever know that somebody knows something? Mm-hmm. They can parrot it back. I mean, I'm up for the idea that beliefs have a struggle to prove or disprove. I'm very much up for that. I think knowledge is the one that's the sticking point for me. That actually knowledge can be proven, I think, is a bit of a stretch. So I'm gonna have to go down the other end. I think I'll go down the other end.
This one.
C.
The line between the two can be delicate.
Or maybe no. I'll go for just perception because it's a nice short answer, isn't it? That just lets me off the hook.
Okay.
I do think, that whole knowledge one is where the problem lies with that one.
Okay. Last question. Finish the sentence.
Gosh.
Truth is A. Relative. B. Absolute but difficult to figure out. C. Absolute.
Goodness me. I think it depends, doesn't it? I think it is both relative and absolute, depending on what it is. That, like you were saying in your PhD, your ED episode the other day, depends what you're trying to find out. Because I think there's absolutely a load of stuff that is where truth is hugely relative. And I think there's some stuff where truth is absolute. And this is where you can get a very, very easy opinion column out of bashing people who talk about their truth.
Yeah.
It's the cheapest way to fill column inches, isn't it?
Yeah.
That one, bashing people who talk about their truth.
Yeah.
And therefore, I am not able to answer that question, but I'm aware that I need to answer that question for you. And so I think probably if you put a gun to my head and said, I have to pick one, knowing that I am doing down a whole other sort of load of stuff, I'll have to go with relative just because I would be more uncomfortable saying absolute.
Okay.
I think the things that I would exclude by saying absolute would be more of a problem than the things I exclude by saying relative.
Okay. That's okay. You've unpacked your axiology quite beautifully there. Okay. Drum roll for
my
the results. You
right.
are, of course, a subjectivist.
There is no external reality. We're all making this all up.
Subjectivists believe that there is no external reality. We're all making this up. Does that reflect your truth, Tom?
Well, let's not forget I am trained in the arts, an education specialist, a teacher, go all the way back to Gert Biester at the start of this. I think, like with your last question, if I've got to be something, I think being that is better than being too far down the other end, given the world which I inhabit. I would rather exclude, have those sorts of caveats of the stuff that doesn't quite fit there and be, happy to explain what those are, than go the other end and say, everything's absolutely nailed down and black and white and there's a right answer to everything. I think it's easier to start from that position and then be happy with the things that you can actually nail down than try to nail everything down and make huge mistakes. What did you get, by the way?
Same.
Oh, this is why we're friends.
I don't think that we answered the questions exactly the same, but probably on balance, we came out the same.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
So
for
a
that.
little bit of fun there,
It's me that needs to lie down now.
Yeah. Oh,
There we go. We've got a
lazy
picture of a hippo now because of our big screen. If you're watching on YouTube, our big screen has gone rogue and is showing Emma more animal pictures.
Yay.
Right, I have a feeling that was long. I hope you enjoyed it. We will go off and rejuvenate ourselves as best as we can. We'll be back in a fortnight and hope you had a nice half term.
Yeah, no procrastinating or procrastinating.
Bye for now.
Bye.
You've been listening to Emma and Tom Talk Teaching, a podcast about all things education, presented by Emma O'Dooher and Tom Breeze. We hope our holiday-based ramblings provided some entertainment. If you made it all the way through the hour and a half, then congratulations. Podcast artwork is by Beth Blanford and the music is by Cameron Stewart. Technical support from Peter Lambon and the studio manager is Adrian Rapps. We're on X at Talk Teaching Pod if you want to come and say hello. We'll be back in a fortnight with something else interesting. Until then, take care and enjoy teaching.